everyone, my name is Antonia Nizzolo from Apps with Antonia, and today we're talking about backing up data. Joining us is Matt Kennedy. He's the Director of Partner Enablement at OwnBackup. OwnBackup is a leading cloud-to-cloud backup and recovery, archiving, and sandbox seeding vendor. How I understand their services is they back up data for Salesforce users, but we're going to get more into that in this discussion. Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for being on this call.
Hey, Antonio, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So to start off, can you share a bit of background on your experience with OwnBackup? How long have you been there and what does your position entail?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been with OwnBackup the last 4 years. Really fast rising company. I was pretty fortunate to join as a 22nd employee.
Wow.
And just recently went over 350. So
Gosh.
really growing very fast. It's kind of interesting because we do Salesforce backup. And a lot of people are kind of confused by that because they're like, Salesforce is in the cloud, isn't my data protected? And that's what we say, it absolutely is. Salesforce isn't going to lose your information for you, but as an end user of Salesforce, you're constantly making changes to your data. So what OwnBackup does is an automated daily snapshot. So you can always compare what your data is today to what it was yesterday, the day before, or a week ago, and actually analyze and identify all those additions, changes, and deletions, and then be able to restore if necessary. What our system is really designed to do is to prevent disaster recovery. If you think about the way Salesforce is administered, you're constantly changing information. You know, we deal with enterprise organizations that have thousands of users. So there's constantly data being added, deleted, and changed. And if something were to go wrong, if somebody accidentally merged some records incorrectly, somebody accidentally deleted, and it's not just one record that gets deleted, it's usually a cascade effect of related information. So what our system allows them to do is to be able to recover and restore that data if it ever went missing or got changed incorrectly.
So what are some disasters that could happen? Are we talking about computers go down, or does somebody manipulate the data and accidentally delete some information?
Yeah, so it's not typically computers going down because that's where Salesforce has you covered.
Yeah.
Right? As a cloud-based solution, if something was going down, they have redundant servers and they can recover and get you back up and running. Where our solution comes in is really more around either end user errors or a lot of times it's integrations. If you think about Salesforce bringing data from an external system, somebody accidentally maps to the wrong field and it overrides one field on 1,000 records. How do you roll that back, right? So a lot of times in Salesforce, admins will work in sandbox environments for their testing and their training and then deploy to production. But sometimes things go wrong in production and that's where we can help them.
Understood. So what does your client onboarding process look like?
It's pretty clean. It's interesting because our solution, even though it runs with Salesforce, we run completely outside of it. So all our infrastructure is typically stored on AWS. We also support Azure. But for our onboarding process, it's basically the end user just signs up for our service. Similar to what they would do in Salesforce, there is no install or implementation. They sign up for our service, then they log into their Salesforce orgs. That gives us the authentication to then do the backups. So we just do everything through the Salesforce APIs, and we're able to extract all that data on a daily basis.
Okay. Now, how often is your data backed up? Is it like every time you enter something, or is it on 5-minute basis?
So it's interesting because I think just because of the size of Salesforce environments, you think about thousands of objects, you know, millions or billions of records. What we do is on an automated daily basis, we'll back up the entire environment. But we also have the ability to do on-demand backup. So an end user or an admin can click backup now, and it would back up during the day as well. So a lot of times we'll have users that'll run, if there is an object that needs to be backed up more often, they may use what we call high frequency backups and maybe just back up that one object every hour if they needed to.
OwnBackup has 3 solutions. There's backup, archiver, and sandbox seeding. Can you briefly explain how these 3 work?
Sure. So our backup solution's actually just been renamed as Recover because you know, we're OwnBackup, right? And that's kind of where we started with the backup space. But really the purpose of that solution is if something goes wrong, you can recover from it. So that's our main core solution. But on top of that, we've added our sandbox seeding feature. So it's a nice capability for an end user and admin to be able to take a subset of their production data and populate a sandbox. So
Hmm.
typically with Salesforce, they get these sandbox environments for testing or for training purposes, but they don't have any data in them. So what our sandbox seeding tool will allow them to select a subset of that data and then populate it in the sandbox.
Hmm.
Makes it much easier, and it brings all the related information. And it also has the ability to anonymize. So if you want to take that production data and put it in a sandbox and mask the name, address, email, phone number, you can do that. So that data is pure test data in that sandbox environment. And then our newest tool, Archiver, came out last year, is really designed to help companies as they grow and scale to reduce their storage. So a lot of times, companies for security compliance purposes, they may have years worth of cases,
Hmm.
tasks that have just built up and is taking more and more space in their system. So what Archiver lets them do is define policies to say, hey, let's take closed cases that are older than 2 years and remove those and put them into archive storage. So it reduces our storage, improves
Yeah.
our system performance, but we can still display that archive data back into Salesforce. So it's kind of
Hmm.
the best of both, where you're really, getting your system in compliance, but still have access to that data if you ever needed it.
That's nice. Yeah. How long has your typical onboarded customer been using Salesforce for?
That's a good question. For us, because the customer has to be using Salesforce,
Hmm.
they typically have been using it for a while. Um, Rarely, maybe when they're purchasing Salesforce, they'll bring us in at the same time. But
Okay.
typically, they've been using it for several years, and now they see the need. Maybe
Yeah.
they had a data loss, and they see the need for a backup solution. Or, as I said, with Archive, their space has grown, and they need to reduce that storage.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I can't imagine too many companies or CEOs would think so far ahead that they need data backup the second that they get Salesforce. But I'm sure a lot of companies understand how important it is once they're working with their data and they're building up all their data in Salesforce.
I think that's what we see is, sometimes when they're first implementing Salesforce, they're using it
Hmm.
as a CRM package and there's not a lot of critical information in there. But as they start
Mm.
using it more and Salesforce becomes a system of record, then they realize this data isn't stored anywhere else. So we do need to have a backup of it.
Mm. Interesting. So OwnBackup is number 25 on the list of America's fastest growing companies. In your 4 years of working on the team, how have you seen the company grow? And is there still a startup culture kind of feel?
There is. It's been pretty amazing. I mean, to see a company grow that fast, right?
Mm.
When I started, it was sort of interesting. We were just figuring it out, right? Like, we had a core solution to back up Salesforce, but we were trying to figure out like what the market looked like. And I give
Yeah.
credit to the founders. Like they had a vision and they said from the start, like we were going to double every year. And we literally have done that. Every year we've doubled in employee, we've doubled in number of users, we've doubled in revenue.
Wow.
And I see that continuing, because as we're adding more solutions, I think what's been interesting is as we've grown, what I've seen is really people that have come on, very talented people with specialized skills, right? Where
Mm.
before, like maybe I was doing demos, I was doing support, I was doing onboardings, right? Now we have people coming in very specific and just
Yeah.
killing those jobs. So as we scale, I think we're actually, building more expertise throughout the company.
Yeah. And I saw on your LinkedIn, it looked like you were looking for a couple of new employees. Is that correct?
Absolutely. If
Okay.
you go to ownbackup.com and go to the company and careers page, I think there's 30 or 40 positions we're hiring for right now. We're
Wow.
we're planning on probably hiring another 200 people this year.
Wow. Oh my gosh. You started at OwnBackup as a sales engineer and you moved into a partner relationship, and you were in sales as well. How did your time as an engineer and more on the tech side translate to greater success in your sales?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when I started with OwnBackup. I kind of came from a developer background,
Hmm.
but they offered me the position as a sales engineer, which was kind of a good challenge because it marries the technical with the ability to communicate, right? So I spend my day on the phone like this, doing Zoom calls all the time. and basically trying to explain our technology, right? Doing demos, doing what we call POCs, which are proof of concepts. So a lot of companies will evaluate our software and they'll run it in a sandbox environment, make sure it does what they want before they move forward with a purchase. And you're dealing with different applications and you need somebody to be able to demonstrate them, right? And that's typically, it's somebody with a sales background, but they need to know what they're talking about. So a lot of times you'll have a salesperson with an engineer. So a sales engineer kind of mixes both, but it's that ability to explain something technical in that people can understand, right? So what was interesting, after doing that for 2 years, we opened up a position on the alliances team where we work really closely with partners. Because if you think about Salesforce is our biggest partner, but there's a lot of other apps that are on the App Exchange that we can complement.
Yeah.
So if somebody's working in a specific industry vertical, if they're working with financial services, if they're working with healthcare, a lot of times there's applications specific to those verticals that also need enhanced solutions for backup and recovery. So what was pitched to me was like, you can join the alliances team as partner enablement manager. And then I was lucky enough to get promoted to director of partner enablement. But it was really like a force multiplier role. Whereas before, as a sales engineer, I was working with an account exec and we were working, one opportunity at a time. So I might be supporting several salespeople and maybe 3 or 4 potential opportunities that could close. But when I came over to the alliances team, now I'm working with a partner. And if we do a really good job and win that partner's business, we could get all of their customers. So instead of just selling for one account, it could be, if we win this partner's business, it could be 50, it could be 100, it could be 500 potential customers. And so that relationship is really interesting, to be able to form those relationships with different partners, not just application vendors, but also consultants. We work with really large GSIs like Accenture, Deloitte. If we can get them to recommend our solutions to their clients, it's really going to help. So I think for any apps that you're talking to, it's kind of interesting. You usually look at it from a development perspective, but then you always want to sell that app, right? So you need somebody to be able to technically convey the benefits of that solution, not just to end users, but also to partners.
Oh, fabulous. And I think about how when I was in the trade show industry, we could sell to an end client, a company that wanted us to put their installation up, or I could sell to a display house who sold to end clients, and I would only need like 5 of those relationships.
That's a perfect analogy, because that's the thing, right? If you do a really good job with that display client, then you could potentially get many, many deals out of it.
Yeah. How long did it take your OwnBackup to recognize like those multitude of opportunities? And did you have to have a great portfolio in place before you could get those kinds of relationships with Deloitte and with those B2B2Bs?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, when I started, again, the company was really small, so we were kind of focused on one customer at a time. But about 3 years ago, we had an VP of alliances who kind of came in with a background working with partners before. And he had worked at Salesforce. So he was very focused for his first year in just building up our relationships with Salesforce. If you think about it, like, we're trying to sell to these accounts and Salesforce has already sold to them. So it's great form of intelligence where our account executives can meet and connect with the Salesforce account exec that already sold there. So now they know who the buyer is, they know what the legal process looks like, they know what the security process looks like, so they can really help us guide us along. And anytime we close a deal, Salesforce gets compensated for it. So it's in the account exec's interest to bring us in and to help us. But after a year of really building up our partner relationship with Salesforce, that's when I joined him and we started branching out and dealing with other application vendors, dealing with these consultants, because we saw now as we grew that we had the ability to now work with other partners and build out those relationships. So it does take time. It's something where you got to plant those seeds and build relationships, but they do pay good dividends over the long haul.
Thank you so much, Matt, for being on this call. It was really interesting to learn about OwnBackup and to learn about why it's important to back up our data. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Appreciate the time.